Last year, on the first day of December, I reached into my desk drawer for a gold-colored wristwatch with a black leather band. It had a round face with black Roman numerals. Below the XII at the top was a rectangular red and white striped graphic with white letters that spelled out BBH & Co., the company where my father worked for 50 years. Dad must have received it at a company event. Did he ever wear it? I only remember seeing a black Casio digital watch on his wrist. I put on the BBH watch and thought about Dad, childhood, and the routines we followed. At breakfast, Mom, Dad, my brother, sister, and I would sit around the table covered in yellow masonite. Dad on one side and Mom on the other. Between bites of cereal, Dad would hold the newspaper as my siblings and I crowded around to read the comics. Each morning we checked in on the Phantom, Dick Tracy, and Charlie Brown. Then each evening after work, Dad would arrive home for dinner at 6 o'clock. The five of us would then return to the kitchen table to eat the meal Mom had prepared and share stories from our days. At bedtime, I would wait for Dad to come into my room and sit at the edge of the bed. By then, he would have taken off his tie, but still wore a pressed white shirt and suit pants from work. We would speak about the day for a moment until Dad clasped his hands. I would follow suit. We would bow our heads, close our eyes, and quietly recite the Lord's Prayer. After saying Amen, Dad would kiss my forehead and whisper, "Sleep tight. Don't let the bed bugs bite." My father's life was built on routines. I could rely on him to get up at the same time each morning, dress in a gray suit, and eat cornflakes for breakfast. His actions, repeated day after day over the course of a childhood, provided me with a sense of security. In the weeks after Dad died, I wanted to call him on the phone. I struggled to remember the sound of his voice. At the time, my wife and I were in the middle of raising 2 children in Seattle. Our son, then a teenager, pushed for freedoms that we resisted giving. My teaching contract was about to end. I worried about losing my job. I worried about losing my connection to my father, that he would just fade away. And then I received a package in the mail from my brother. Inside was the watch. My brother found it in Dad's dresser drawer when going through his things the week after he died, 12 years ago. I wore the watch for a year. It accompanied me on my commute to school, sat with me in the classroom, and joined my family at the dinner table. At the end of that year, I continued to wear the watch each day in December, the month Dad was born. Dad's absence made me think about how I connect with the rest of my family. Each spring, I make a list of 13 children, 9 parents, and 3 grandparents. Over the next months, I take pictures of each person on the list. In November, I edit the images to create a calendar to be delivered to everyone in December. My niece first appeared in the calendar in 2006. 6 months after she was born. In the 19 calendars that followed, her new teeth became second teeth. Braces appeared and disappeared. Her hair grew to her ears, and then her shoulders, and then moved towards her elbows. In photos, she spins in a playground, does a TikTok dance, and stands behind the checkout counter at her summer job. The calendar hangs in my sister-in-law's office, my nephew's dorm room, and my son's cubicle at work. It lives in our kitchen where last year my nephew's portrait occupied the month of December. In the photo, he stands with his back to the ocean. The sun off camera to the left lights one side of his face and casts a shadow over the other. One year, the calendar cover featured pictures of my mother, her 2 sisters and their husbands. My mother and one of her sisters raised their children in the Boston area. The 3rd sister worked as an artist in Vermont. I remember when I was in my 20s and started visiting her studio, a room with a high ceiling and windows that lined the upper walls. Paintbrushes lay in orderly rows on 2 low tables next to a painting in progress. Over the next 30 years, I admired how her work evolved from realistic landscapes to colorful dream worlds and complete abstraction. For each Valentine's Day, she would create small heart paintings and mail them to the family. As her painting style changed, so did the hearts. She made the hearts over 3 decades, until 2017, when doctors found a tumor in her brain. The growth disrupted her ability to think and speak. I worried about her mind. I thought about the hearts. Not once had I sent her a Valentine in return. On a Friday, shortly after her diagnosis, I cut up photographs of our magnolia tree that I had taken at different times of the year. A bloom with white petals, covered in green leaves, branches lined with snow, and combined them with thick pieces of pink, green, and blue paper to make a 4 by 6 inch card. I wrote a note on the back and mailed it to her. Each Friday for a month, I repeated the process until the week my aunt died. After the memorial service at her home in Vermont, I remember walking through her living room and seeing the cards I had mailed her, standing in a line on the mantelpiece over the fireplace. In times of crisis, I want to take action. Even when there's nothing to do, I feel uneasy sitting still. Making those cards helped me reach across the country and in some small way shorten the distance between us. I felt this same pull to action 5 years later when my daughter was in college and going through a difficult time. To help ease her burden, we spoke on the phone throughout the day. She from her bedroom in New York or at the university library, me at my desk or lying on our couch in Seattle. Hearing her voice, I thought, I would do anything for my children, but what do I have to offer? When my daughter and son were little, I covered scraped knees with Band-Aids, held hands to cross the street, and delivered exhausted bodies to bedtime. My daughter needed none of that now. Still, I wanted to wrap my arms around her and carry her home. I wanted to make this go away. Instead, I pressed the phone to my ear. On the 3rd or 4th call of the day, after running out of things to say, we would sit in silence. I'd close my eyes and listen to the police sirens pass by her bedroom window. One afternoon, when she rang, I was reading the newspaper. We said our hellos, and then the call once again grew quiet. I didn't do well with the silence. Are you still there? I wanted to ask. Is the conversation over? What can I do for you? There were no words to make this better, but I needed to say something. I looked down at the newspaper on my lap. When I left home to go to college, I continued to read the comic section. For a lifetime, I had followed the lives of those characters. I turned to the back of the newspaper and said, in Peanuts, Peppermint Patty is having trouble at school. Today she's sitting at her desk and says, I'm not sure about the first question. As a matter of fact, I don't think I can answer any of these questions. Maybe I could just help the custodian sweep the halls. The next morning, my daughter called and said, how's Peppermint Patty? I read the comic to her. I have a problem, Peppermint Patty said to Snoopy, Charlie Brown's dog. My dad is willing to send me to private school, but they all cost $4,000 or $5,000. Snoopy handed her a brochure that said, Ace Obedience School, complete training, $25. Peppermint Patty signed up for the school, received her diploma, and then learned that she had attended an obedience school for dogs. I continued to narrate the story each morning until I realized that I could text my daughter the actual comic strip. On subsequent calls, we discussed Snoopy's eye movements and how Peppermint Patty wore a striped shirt and flip-flops. Even as my daughter's situation improved, I continued to send her the daily comic. Last year, on December 6th, I lay in bed before going to sleep and thought over the day. It started with sending the comic strip. Then I dressed for work, almost forgot to put on Dad's watch, ate a sandwich for lunch, late afternoon made changes to the calendar and ordered copies, wrote a note to my cousin before dinner. When he fell into trouble 3 months earlier, I'd started sending him a postcard on Fridays. Individually, I didn't place too much weight on each of these routines. The watch gave the month a bit of ceremony. The comic section comforted me, so maybe it would help my daughter. Making the cards eased my worries. And the family calendar was something that my mother had started decades ago. For years, she carried a camera and used rubber cement to glue her photographs into the 12 months. After she stopped, I continued the practice. It felt like she was handing off the baton to me. But seeing these routines stack up, one on top of the other, I couldn't help but wonder, what am I doing? At one time, it was just the calendar, then I added the watch and the cards, and now the comic strip. I've been sending peanuts for months. Her crisis is over. Do I keep going? I woke up the next morning thinking about the rabbi I had met on a flight to New York 2 years earlier. I sat in the aisle seat, he in the middle. A few hours into the flight, he asked to get out. I stood up, happy for an excuse to stretch my legs. He walked to the back of the plane and soon returned saying, "Sometimes they let me pray in the back, but not today. Would you mind changing seats? I need to stand." I sat in his middle seat. He stood to my left, wrapped a piece of string around his waist twice, and then loosely tied it. He put on his suit coat, placed a felt hat on top of the yarmulke that already rested on his head, pulled out a phone and started to read the text on the screen. He spoke in a quiet voice and gently swayed back and forth. I bent over, rested my elbows on my knees, and looked down to the floor to give him some privacy. Listening to the rabbi's voice, I wondered, when did I last pray? My head is bowed and I'm almost kneeling. This seems like a perfect moment. Maybe I should try. But what do I say? Where to begin? My wife's name came to mind, and then my children's names, followed by my brother, my sister, and my parents' names, and the names of their spouses and children. Is this a prayer, I thought? Didn't prayer look more like the man standing next to me? These questions stayed with me for months until I read an essay by Sarah Sherbill. In it, she wrote, "Prayer need not be a poem or acrostic or hymn. Prayer can simply bubble up from the deepest place inside of yourself. It can be a prayer in your own words. It can be a prayer with no words." She imagined that prayer might be directed towards God or a loved one or yourself. A prayer to give you, as she said, the strength to act with courage even when you are terrified. The essay ended with maybe our prayer looks nothing like we thought it would. Up until then, I was fixed on prayer looking like my childhood and bowing my head to say the Lord's Prayer out loud, as if what I did back then should be what I do now. But what if, like Sherwood wrote, prayer looked like something else? Could it be as simple as texting my daughter, or saying hello to a photograph of my nephew as I walk into the kitchen, or stopping what I'm doing on a Friday to write a postcard? Have I been praying all this time? I don't know. What I do know is that wearing my everyday watch is routine, and putting on my Father's watch is ritual. Both rest on my wrist, both tell the time, but one is far from the other. Maybe prayer is something that on the outside could look like brushing your teeth, when inside it feels deeply personal. On the back of one of the cards that I made for my aunt, I had described the view of the trees from my office window at work. On another, I detailed the rain and feeling the wet ground beneath my feet. I could have written about the pet rabbits that live on our deck, or my favorite sandwich. I could have written almost anything, because the real message lay hidden in the blank spaces between the words. You are on my mind. I have not forgotten you. I miss you. I cannot change this. I cannot protect you. I wish I could. I want to carry this weight with you. I want to ease your burden. You are not alone.